I'll just reintroduce myself. So I'm Katie Lee. I'm a policy advisor on the PCFO tech team, as well as a consulting manager at Netter Consulting. Today, we'll be going over two exciting grant opportunities, the Community Change Grants Program and the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Grant. Between each of these presentations, there will be opportunities for group discussion, to share ideas and ask questions. Next slide. The first grant opportunity that I'll be going over is the Community Change Grants Program. Next slide. So under the Inflation Reduction Act, EPA received $3 billion to fund environmental and climate justice activities. The Community Change Grants, or CCG, is the primary newly created grant program under this allocation. It provides $2 billion to support comprehensive, community-driven, and place-based approaches that address environmental and climate injustices for communities facing legacy pollution, climate change, and persistent disinvestment. This grant is being managed by EPA's Office of Environmental Justice and External Civil Rights. Important to note that there are no matching funds required for this grant opportunity, as well as two tracks that we'll be going over next. Applications will be accepted on a rolling basis until November 21st, 2024. However, it's good to note that EPA has recommended that you submit your application as early as possible. Though the deadline is in November, funds may be exhausted prior to that final deadline. And additionally, if you submit early, you can have the opportunity to resubmit if your first attempt isn't successful. Next slide. To apply to the community change grants, you'll need to enter into what is called a statutory partnership. And essentially what that means is it's just a partnership that's required under the law. So the partnership must include at least one community-based organization. The other partner can be either another CBO, federally recognized tribe, local government, or institute of higher education. Once that partnership is established, you can then decide which one will serve as the lead applicant. And the CBO does not need to be the lead applicant. So in most of our cases, the local government could also serve as the lead partner. The lead applicant will receive funds from EPA and distribute subawards to both the partner and the collaborating entities. They are also responsible for management and reporting for the grant. Other organizations can participate in the application as collaborating entities, and those include other community-based organizations, federally recognized tribes, local governments, institutes of higher ed, state and federal government entities, and these collaborating entities may receive subawards. The graphic on the screen here shows how you can assemble a diverse team for your application. It's important to note that for-profit entities are not reflected in this graphic. EPA has pretty strict rules about subawards versus contracts needing to comply with a number of procurement requirements. So be prepared to review these requirements before involving for-profit partners. Because forming complex coalitions and partnerships takes time, we recommend starting to plan this part of your application right away. Next slide. So there are two tracks that you can apply for. Track one is titled Community-Driven Investments for Change. This is primarily focused on funding projects that implement climate action and pollution reduction strategies that meaningfully improve environmental, climate, and resilience conditions affecting disadvantaged communities. This has the largest share of the total allocation, $1.96 billion out of the total $2 billion. EPA estimates that they'll make 150 awards ranging from sizes 10 to 20 million each. The 10 million number is not a hard minimum. You can propose projects underneath that, but just keep in mind that really small projects won't be as competitive. EPA is looking to fund transformative projects in these communities. Track two, on the other hand, is called Meaningful Engagement for Equitable Governments. This is about facilitating the engagement of disadvantaged communities in government process. to advance environmental and climate justice. The total allocation is much smaller, $400 million. EPA estimates making about 20 awards of sizes between $1 and $3 million each. One thing to remember for both tracks is you must demonstrate that the projects will benefit a disadvantaged community. So disadvantaged communities must meet at least one of the defining criteria, which is being defined as disadvantaged in the EPA IRA disadvantaged community map. You can also be a farm worker community or a disadvantaged unincorporated community. And we'll provide the link to that mapping tool by EPA in the chat. Next slide. So let's dive into the tracks in more detail. Track 1 objectives are to increase community resilience through climate action activities, reduce local pollution to improve public health, center meaningful community engagement, build community strength, reach priority populations, and maximize integration across projects. Track 1 has a very place-based approach. As part of your application, you're required to submit a project area map to show specifically which communities will benefit. This track is not intended to fund regional or statewide projects, but rather local projects that will specifically benefit disadvantaged communities. Next slide. The Track 1 requirements are pretty unique, so there are 6 main requirements to keep in mind as you're selecting projects for an application and building your application narrative. We recommend that you use these criteria to prioritize projects early, so you're selecting the most competitive and eligible project idea. So first is the climate action strategy. All projects must address at least one of the strategies listed below that are aimed to advance community adaptation and resilience. So those are green infrastructure and nature-based solutions, mobility and transportation options, energy efficient, healthy and resilient housing and buildings, microgrid installation, community resilience hubs, brownfield redevelopment. Note that this is the redevelopment activities, not cleanup or analysis, waste reduction and management, and workforce development. Your project must also address at least one pollution reduction strategy. That's focused on pollution monitoring, prevention, and remediation. So the 4 categories are indoor air quality, outdoor air quality, clean water infrastructure, and hazardous waste management. The third requirement is engagement and governance plan. This should address past engagement and outreach conducted around the proposed project idea, methods for future engagement that mitigate barriers to involvement, and plans to establish a collaborative governance structure that details the role of project partners, as well as community residents or representatives, and how they'll participate in the ongoing project implementation. Next is the community strength plan. One of the things that EPA wants to see is as you're addressing environmental and climate injustices, you're also maximizing local economic benefits. And this should include strategies that prevent displacement and avoid unintended consequences of the project's activities. Finally, we're moving to the last 2, which are readiness approach and the compliance plan. So readiness approach is you should be able to demonstrate how the project will begin shortly after award. EPA wants to see that your projects can start within 120 days. So these are really shovel-ready projects. And critically, they need to be completed within the 3-year grant period. That there will be no funding extensions, so that 3 years is a hard deadline. Good questions to ask when you're thinking about potential ideas are what government approvals are needed, how does this project align with my existing plans, and do we have site control? And lastly is the compliance plan. You should describe how you'll comply with all of the grant's terms and conditions. So looking at all of these requirements as a whole, we recommend a good place to start sourcing your ideas is a climate action plan or sustainability plan if your community has one. Looking at if there are unfunded or partially funded priority projects that would meet these criteria. You might also look at community health action plans or water and wastewater management plans for ideas. Lastly, in sourcing project ideas, you can look at current community engagement in disadvantaged communities, thinking about what feedback you've gotten on their top priorities and if any of those ideas would fit. Next slide. Track 2 projects will be much smaller in scope compared to Track 1. These are focused on building capacity and structures for communities to meaningfully participate in sustainability and climate initiatives. The objectives are to build capacity of communities to evaluate and redress environmental and climate injustices and give disadvantaged communities a meaningful voice in government decision-making processes. Next slide. So you can see here that there are 4 project examples that EPA has provided. It's good to know that this isn't an exhaustive list. You can propose other ideas that focus on breaking down systemic barriers to community participation and government processes. This can be done by creating engagement and feedback mechanisms with two-way communication between both the affected community members and government decision makers. Next slide. So as a whole, we've come up with 4 key steps to prepare not only your project ideas, but the application. So the first is to engage your CBOs right away. Since CBOs are community-based organization, participation is required. Reach out to your local CBOs to see if they're planning to apply or if there is a community project that aligns with both of your priorities. Second, there's free grant technical assistance resources. So EPA has selected Endina, who's a technical assistance provider, to support communities in applying for the Community Change Grant. So again, this is free technical assistance to prepare application. Though they won't provide direct grant writing, they'll pair you with experts who can help you think through the project design. Third is consider applying early. As I said earlier, applications have a hard deadline of November 21st, but funds may be exhausted prior to then. So applications will be reviewed on a rolling basis. We recommend applying sometime around the summer of this year. And again, you can resubmit your application if it's not accepted the first time. So applying early is definitely important. And finally, evaluate potential projects on the competitiveness criteria. Consider if the project is implementation ready and located in a disadvantaged community. See if it's shovel ready. So keeping in mind that requirement that the grant funds must be spent in 3 years. And a final reminder that there's also a strong place-based approach. So your partners should directly serve the disadvantaged community in the project area, and you should be able to demonstrate concrete benefits to disadvantaged communities. Next slide. So these are just some key resources. We highly recommend that you review these if you're interested in applying for the Community Change Grant, since this presentation is just a brief overview of the requirements.